and also managing financial risk. So what I want to first do is introduce each of our panelists, and I'm going to start to my far left, and then we could just state your name, your information, and bio, whatnot. We'll start with you.
All right, is this on? Sorry, we should have tested this beforehand. Thank you. Can you hear me? Is this on? Do we need it? All right. Thanks, everyone. My name is Marty Isley. I'm a commercial loan officer at Warsaw Federal. I've been in banking about 20 years. A little bit about, I'm Cincinnati born and bred, West Side. Anybody? All right.
I'm from the West Side.
All right, there we go.
I used to live on the West Side.
Warsaw Federal is a West Side bank. We started on Warsaw Avenue, 1893, something crazy, right? So we're over 130 years old. I can do math. I'm a banker. 130. But we're a savings and loan, which means we are a mutual savings bank. What makes that different about us is that we don't have shareholders. We're owned by our members. Similar to a credit union, but credit unions are regulated differently. They don't pay taxes. We're a bank, so we're regulated just like a bank. But we take our earnings at the end of the year, okay, and we put it back into the bank. We don't pay dividends to our shareholders. So the decisions that our board makes and our president, Robbie, makes, every decision the bank makes, there's two people they think about. It's our members and our employees. Okay, so it takes a little bit of that shareholder sort of risk out of it. I've been in banking 20 years, and I've been part of 3 different acquisitions while I've been at a bank where we've been taken over, right? And it's a nightmare. Okay, so there's no activist investors. There's nobody pushing the bank to sell. Our decisions are made solely for what's in your best interest as our customer and as the employee, which I love. That part of the reason why I came there. Circle back to maybe 2018, 2019, our savings and loan, right? Just the cost to run your IT department, the cost to make $1 in banking is difficult for small banks. You know, bigger banks, they could maybe take, 25 cents and turn it into $1. Where we have to take 50, 60, 70 cents and turn it into $1. So our efficiencies aren't great at a small bank. So what we did was we became part of a larger organization, and it's called First Mutual Holding Company. They're out of Lakewood, Ohio. They're an Ohio bank. They're up in Cleveland. But there's 5 different mutual banks who are structured just like us that are all affiliates. So we share HR, IT, compliance. All those things are shared services between our 5 banks, which makes us it gives us the ability to punch above our weight, right? So we're a tiny bank that can now do bigger deals. At that time, we started doing commercial lending and commercial real estate lending and investment property lending. I came on board in 2021. Since then, we've closed about 22 or 23 commercial real estate loans, and we're trying to build that portfolio from the ground up. Now, as a savings and loan, our bread and butter, our niche is residential lending. Always has been, always will be. But we do have a portfolio of commercial real estate and business lending that we're trying to grow. So that's our plan. Now, here's where it gets exciting. In 2019, 2020, we started planting the seeds to really grow and find a creative way to make us more viable. Fourth quarter of last year, our regulators and the government approved our application to convert our charter to become a minority deposit institution. All right, MDIs, or minority deposit institutions, there's maybe 30 or 40 of them in the United States that are black-owned banks, okay? And we can proudly say that we are now one of those 36 of them. There's 2 in Ohio. We're the only one in Cincinnati. What that means for us is the majority of our board of directors are African American. Our bank president is maybe the only female African American bank president that I've ever heard of. There may have been one in the past, but clap it up. Right? So we're consciously trying to serve an underserved market historically. The African American community and the minority community has been underserved, and that really is our target audience now. So we need to make a majority of our loans. Not a majority. I think Robbie's at a third. Can I speak to these details? The majority of our loans we're targeting to the underserved markets in the Cincinnati market, right? So that's our target audience. Now, does that mean we can lower our credit standards? No, we're not going to change our loan policy. It's my son calling, sorry. call him back. He probably wants money. He's 24. But that's a little bit of flavor about who we are and what we're doing. So that's Warsaw Federal. I'm Marty. I'm the commercial lender. Jose's here. Robbie's here. And we've got a table out front. And if you don't get a chance to catch up with any one of us, the table out front's got that little QR code where you can scan it, put in your contact information, and either Jose or I or Robbie will get back to you and answer any questions you might have. But, you know, like everybody else, we're a bank and it's competitive. And, you know, we'd love to have more customers. So please consider supporting our cause and open a checking, savings, CD, anything you can do that would help us grow. You know, we're going to turn those deposits back out into loans in the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Scott?
Hey everyone, my name is Scott Pearson. I work for Eagle Realty Group, which is a subsidiary of Western Southern Financial Group. I'm sure most of you have heard of here in town. I run our structured equity team, which is responsible for sourcing, underwriting, and closing joint venture equity investments. We also have a debt team at Eagle that is lending on multifamily, hotels, industrial, all your major property types. We have been investing in the multifamily space primarily through ground-up construction for 30, 35 years at this point. We've also done a bunch of value-add acquisition type of deals, and also, like I said, industrial and hotels as well. We invest across the country. We don't do a whole lot here in our own backyard. We own Queen City Square and some other stuff, so try to stay out in other markets a little bit. Our typical deal is probably a plus or minus 300 unit multifamily property, ground up construction. We're looking to put out probably $10 to $30 million of equity at any given time. And we're trying to do usually call it 10 to 15 deals a year. So we've been trying to stay pretty active even in what has been a very difficult environment the last 2 to 3 years. That's kind of it.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. You made it to 3 p.m. today. My name is Tony Jones. I'm with Monopoly Man Construction and Real Estate Firm. We are a general construction and development company. We focused on, medium, low volume, multi-unit, single family development and renovation. We have a portfolio of rental properties throughout the Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky area. We really specialize and love to work with investors and developers, pretty much, turn their visions into addresses. And so love to connect with anyone offline. Like I said, we offer general construction services and development services.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Rick Powell. I am the Vice President of Cushman & Wakefield's Global Occupier Services Group. I'm also the Managing Partner of Blue Ocean Development. Blue Ocean Development is what we call a kingdom-driven entrepreneur effort. That means that we look through business through our faith lens. We're very proud of being able to do that. Our sweet spot are projects anywhere from 5 to about 15 million. Most of it is land development. We'll come in, get the raw land, put in all of the infrastructure, sell like single family lots to large production builders. The other piece of it is ground up new construction.
All right, thank you. If we can just give our panel a round of applause for taking the time out to be here. And so what we do is we have a set of questions that we're going to ask the panel, and then towards the last 15, 20 minutes, we're going to open up to the audience to ask questions. So we're just going to keep this an open forum, so I'll just ask the question, and each one of you can just answer as you feel. So the first question is, what are the key components of a real estate development budget?
Let's go first.
Scott was ready for that one.
So, key components, I think really if you're looking at development, you got obviously land costs, what the hard cost budget's going to be, and then your soft costs, so design, permitting, that sort of thing. Especially in the last couple of years, it's been very hard to kind of peg a number for development budgets. Obviously during COVID, costs were going up extremely fast. You never really knew what a project was actually going to cost until you signed the construction contract, which makes it really difficult to plan anything. Fortunately, that has kind of calmed down a little bit. I I think bigger issue that we've seen lately is, land always is this last piece to move. And as things have really slowed down the last 18 months or so, as interest rates have gone up, the hard cost numbers have stabilized, soft costs stabilized, but the land sellers just really haven't caught up to where the market's at. And so, a market where you used to be paying, $50,000 a unit for land, a lot of southeast markets, now that's probably 20, 25,000 a unit if you have any prayer of making the numbers work. But, land sellers are still kind of anchored to those higher numbers. And so that's really put a damper on being able to put together a project that makes any sense.
Yeah, when we're talking to developers as the banker, really making sure the developer understands the risk that's involved in a project, right? And one of the first questions I always ask is, what's your investment strategy? Are you trying to build a property that's going to be generations to come, like cash flow for you and your kids for the next 20 years? You're going to build it and hold it, or are you going to flip it? Like, what's your investment strategy? The key word's investment. So, like, Jose, what are we paying on a 24-month CD right now? Like almost 4.875. So if you're doing $1 million deal, okay, you're building, say, an 11-unit apartment building. It's going to cost, I'm making this number up, but it's $1 million project, and the bank expects the developer to put in 20 to 25%. Okay, you're putting in $200,000 of equity of your own cash into the project. Okay, and you're not going to get any return on that cash. That's coming out of your pocket first, right? That $200,000, the first $200,000 spent on the project is yours. The last $800 is the bank's, right? So you're giving them the $200,000 out of your pocket day one, and you might not see a return on that cash for 9-10 months after the property's built, and people are in there living, and you're going to start making incremental returns on it. So your cash on cash return, the money coming out of your pocket, you might not make anything the first year. You might make 8 to 10. What's that percentage you're going to make in year two, right? Because if you take that $200,000 and just put it in a CD, after 2 years you might make about $19,000 based on rates right now. $200,000 at 4.5%. That's good money. You're taking no risk by putting that $200,000 into a CD. You're taking significant risk building a building. Anything could go wrong. You could be, rates could go up. COVID could happen. Natural disaster. Your property could get flooded. There's significant risk in any construction project, and you can make 4.5% by taking no risk, right? So have you thought through what your cash on cash return is going to be for your investment? So that's really when we look at crafting a budget, we got to understand what kind of rents it's going to bring in and how much it's going to cost to build, and what are you going to get paid for your risk as an investor is really my first feel when I'm interviewing and talking to proposed, clients that are proposing a deal. So.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that, I think another thing is when before you get into development is making sure that you do correct market study and understanding the landscape of the area that you're doing development in. So that may be doing your own research, relying on other real estate professionals to give you an understanding of cap rates, average square footage costs, right? Because these are all things that really are important to when you are analyzing these deals, right, for you to understand so that you can then project your potential returns and your potential cash flow in the future. Another thing to consider is like you said, the effect on what rates may look like and the increases of, the impact of inflation over time, right? Factoring that into your projections so that if your exit strategy is to hold a property, right, a development, and you're going to hold this development over 10 years, you need to understand what that looks like from a financial perspective and expenses to understand what does that look like over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. So that's something to pay attention to, and consult with your bankers and your experts, people that are in the industry and have seen these markets as they go up and down, because they can give you kind of a better idea of what to expect.
I think the question was, what are the key elements in a
key components.
Development budget? And I heard you really, spell out what those items are in terms of hard, soft costs. One of the sneakiest areas is the pre-development effort before you ever put a shovel in the ground. That's the piece that I think is always underestimated in terms of your time, in terms of your ability to pay for due diligence and market study and all of that. So if we're talking about a budget, there's the construction budget and there's a development budget, and don't forget about the pre-development budget. That is the area where I think a lot of people get really long in the tooth with regards to a project. You fall in love with a project, and you're pushing and you're pushing and you're pushing, and you are burning up daylight and money.
Thank you.
To that point, a lot of our partners that we work with on the projects that we do, a 300-unit apartment development, our partners are $2 million into it, and probably at least 12 months of work before they even know if it's going to make it or not, before we would come into the deal. So they're putting in significant money, and it doesn't always, I'd say it's probably 50-50 on, for even the best developers, whether projects actually get to the finish line or not. So
Yeah,
it's
that's absolutely right. We use a scorecard. We look at not only the financial metrics, but then we look at also our ability to execute the project. And we're really honest about our ability to execute the project. So as a developer, you ride around and you are always seeing potential projects, right? Every vacant property, right? It's just the way, that's our lens, right? We always see it. So what we do is that we take all of those ideas and we have our lead developer be responsible for completing the scorecard. And part of that scorecard says, will this deal actually meet our financial metrics, right? And there are 5 things. The cap rate, we look at cash on cash. So the cap rate is your net operating income divided by the price. The cash on cash is just simply saying, once I put, this amount of money in, how much money am I going to get back in the first year? We look at the total cash required because there's only so much money that we have to work with. And equity is more expensive than debt. We look at the net operating income after financing, and then we look at the total project size. So like those are sort of the big 5 metrics, if you will. Then the other side of our scorecard is we have a worksheet that the lead developer is responsible for clicking through, right? And that helps us understand how much due diligence, how much information, is this just a pipe dream? Like how much analysis has already gone into the opportunity? That comes together, it gives us a score. Our partners get together and we then prioritize what we're going to pursue and what we're not going to pursue. The most valuable thing that you have is your time and your team. And you want to, especially if you don't have a lot of money, you want to make sure that you protect your time and your team.
What was number 5 after net operating income?
The project size, right? And part of the project size just helps us understand our ability to bring the necessary equity to the table to satisfy what the bank might be looking for, but it's also it's an indicator of how complex the deal is, right? We don't want to get involved in a deal that is so complicated that I can't get out within the time frame that I want to get out, or so complicated that I spend 2 years on a deal, right? 3 years on a deal before we ever break ground.
Thank you. Next question is, how do you go about developing a detailed financial model for a real estate development project? And it can be anybody.
So a detailed financial model, I think that it goes into a lot of parts, and he hit on a lot of them already. So your pre-development costs, what are your soft costs going to be in terms of your financing costs? Because banks just don't give out money for free. You got to understand that there's points that are charged, right? There are things that you incur during your actual due diligence process and your financing process. So you got to account for a lot of those things. There is cost to be associated with, because you're getting maybe two different styles of loans, there may be costs for your acquisition, there may be costs for your actual construction, right? And so all of these things that you have to consider as you're building the model, and then you have to understand also from expenses is how much does it cost to operate this project, right? You have operation costs, so you have a little something that hits us all the time called taxes, right? You got to factor in taxes because Uncle Sam wants his money, right? You have to understand what management may cost, right? What your insurance may cost. This is the silent killer right now for a lot of our deals is insurance right now. Every time a national disaster happens anywhere around the world, for some reason we feel it in Ohio, right? Every time something happens, our rates go up here in Ohio. And so you know, those are just a few things that you have to consider when you're talking about, all right, what information do I need to even understand if we should pursue this or not, right? Is this a good opportunity for us? Because there's a lot of hours that go into putting a development together. And he hit on this just as he was talking about it. You want to make sure that you have somewhat of a feasible deal before you put 100 hours, you know, you put your team on this for 100 hours to put this whole project together. So these are just things that you need to consider, you know, some things, not all, some things that you need to consider before you take a deep dive into it.
Yeah, I think one thing is just having a team of people around to help you. I mean, in my mind, if you're a developer, I mean, you're really not an expert in every little thing. You're kind of quarterbacking the whole process. And so you need to have the legal people, the financial people, the construction people, all that are experts in that space that then you can kind of just get everybody moving in the right direction that can help you figure out, okay, well, does this make sense? Does this make sense? I think that's, in my mind, that's the best way to approach it.
You got a question?
Yeah. So I'm an underwriter at PNC Bank on the market rate side, and I'm used to receiving like OMs and these big pretty packages from developers. So I'm wondering on the smaller side, like less than 5 million, are you guys is your team putting together OMs yourself, or what materials are you sharing with your bank? Are you sending models to them? Just curious.
Yeah, so there's 5 things that we kind of pull together, whether we are talking to a bank or an investor, right? And by the way, we're not talking to a bank or an investor until it's gone through our process, because part of when you go to the bank or when you go to the investor, it's your credibility, right? You want to be able to go to them with bankable or investable deals, right? So if you're figuring things out, too many things on the fly, then I think you lose some credibility. So we try to spend a lot of time up on the front, but in our packages, it is the project narrative. You know, what is it? You know, what's the benefit to the stakeholder, right? What will the community get? What will the city get? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? So that project narrative. It's a project layout so that they can clearly see the vision. They can clearly see how lots are laid out. They can clearly see that an architect kind of did some advanced work on what that building is going to look like. There is the project structure, you know, how much debt versus equity, you know, who are our partners. There is the project schedule, we'll include that. And then there is the risk factors, right? So we try to think through the risk factors, meaning like the economic pressures that might be on the project, the market factors that might be on the project, but we also make sure that we come with some mitigating risk elements, right? The things that are within our control that we can do. So hopefully that helps. That's like the big 5 things that we will pull together in a package. I've never written, you know, a big binder and given it to anyone, right? I've never done that on any of my deals. For us, it usually starts with someone, I'm at breakfast and talking with an investor, all right? I'm talking to a bank, I'm helping them understand what we're doing. Then if they're interested, I send them a very short kind of executive summary on it. If they're still interested, then we jump on a call and we start talking through items. But I've never done a deal where I had like a big binder that I was sending to someone.
And actually, this is the perfect segue for the next question, which was tips on presenting your development budget and financial model to stakeholders and investors.
Yeah, I think just to add a couple of other key points that are important to that actual narrative as well too is also make sure that you detail your team as well, because a lot of the times the person that engaged with the actual lender may not have individually the experience or the financial income to do the deal, but the team does. And that's why you see a lot of smaller developers do collaborations with larger developers, because that is the way that you get your foot into the door, and not necessarily. And so making sure that you express what the team's experience is, their capabilities, what they have done. And then he also talked about risk, but also mentioned the mitigation, how you plan to actually overcome some of these risks that you are taking, like, for instance, how you plan to exit from a property based on because the rates are high or whatever it may be. So making sure you talk about the risk and then the opportunity as well, right? And the impact of that opportunity. So how many jobs is this going to create? Did you talk to the community, and this is what the community actually said that they wanted for the space, right? What work did you do up front to determine the usage of the space that you're proposing to develop? Because if especially banks or, if you're going to the city to get support and entitlements from the city, they want to make sure that your project is solving a problem in the community. They don't necessarily just want to support you just to, enrich your own self. They want to make sure that you're solving a problem. So talk about what you have discovered over the time as you talk to different stakeholders in the community throughout your pre-development process, and, so that you can make a feasible project for the community that you're doing it in.
I think for me, the way you described it made a lot of sense. Like, it's make it be credible and make it easy for me to figure out what's going on. We get 60 or 70 deals in every month of people looking for equity, and we're going to be trying to do 2 or 3 of them, maybe. And so, the first time I kind of skim through the package that I get, it's really looking for, how can I kill this? Like, where is it? Who is it? What's the timeline? What's being built? Do any of those, is it just in a market that we're not going to go to? Is the check size too big, too small? And from there, assuming it gets through that, it's, okay, what's the return profile look like? If it's not in kind of a certain band, then I'm either suspicious or the returns are too low for it to be worth our time. And then from there, it's, okay, the returns are kind of where I'm expecting it. What are the assumptions going into that? And then if I can kind of get through those and not see any red flags, then it's like, okay, this becomes worth spending more time on digging into what the project's actually going to be, who's involved, all of that. But it's from the credibility piece. I can't tell you how many deals that we see where it's clearly just been like copy and paste a chart out of Excel, drop it into a Word document. There's typos, their formatting is not consistent. Like, if you can't put together a 10-page document without those kind of errors, why am I going to trust you with $30 million? So it's putting forth that, making that good first impression, showing that you can put together and be credible, put together a cohesive argument for why I should spend time on a deal.
Yeah, and we look at a community bank, we get a lot of different looks, and it could be anything from, a guy has an idea to buy a half acre of rural land, near Indiana, and they want to build a car wash, to, I'm buying there's a business owner owns an auto body shop and he wants to buy his building, right? Just have you thought through all the risks involved? Like, if you're the first guy, what's the zoning? Have you talked to the municipality? Are there utilities? And the second guy is, well, the property used to be a gas station and there's environmental risk involved. Have you thought through any of that? So really just being knowledgeable on the property and what you want to do, what the topography is. Have you had a civil engineer come out and tell you that, you can build an 11-unit or an 11-story building on this site? What was there prior to? We did a deal a couple years ago in Clifton, and they demoed a building. Well, they didn't know that there was a building that was tore down in the early 1900s, and the foundation was another 20 feet under the foundation of the one they tore down. Additional costs went into getting that site ready, right? The developer had to put more money into the deal. Have you thought through all those risks, and do you have the capacity to overcome any of those hurdles? But just being knowledgeable and understanding what all the risks are from top to bottom when you're talking to the bank. And I think some of that comes through, if you're a non-experienced developer, talking to other developers and talking to other people that are in that industry that are willing to share their knowledge is huge. Just come to events like this and finding people that have a similar story and want to do similar things, I think is really, really key. And just networking with those folks is huge. So.
One thing that I want to add to that is that every bank or investor, they have a profile of the deal that they're looking for that makes sense to them. And what we try to do is we have a list of go-to investors and a list of go-to banks. And I want to understand what that bank, I want to understand the lens that they're going to look at my deal through. So that way I can make sure that I show up with the information that matters the most to them. I think sometimes, younger, newer developers, they will try to just create a packet that is going to work for everyone that's out there, and it gets lost, right? So I think a big part of it is understanding what is it that this particular investor is looking for, what makes the deal work for them, right? A lot of banks right now are looking for deposits, right? So we are actively thinking about how do we create more recurring revenue so that we can be able to make deposits at your bank and develop a relationship. The last thing I'll say is that this is the Black Developers Conference. My buddy Carl, right, he says, look, Rick, there's no such thing as a black company, a lesbian company. There are great companies who happen to be owned by black people. So I'm saying this to say we have to figure out what our more is. Make others realize extra. What is it that I'm bringing to the table? And you gotta, like, operational excellence is just like table stakes, right? Due diligence and understanding the deal is table stakes. It's this extra thing that happens so that when I show up and I'm sharing a deal with you, I already know kind of the lens that you're going to look through, and I can quickly kind of say, I think it hits this for you, I can validate. I think it hits that for you, I can validate. You may say, no, that's kind of out of our band, right? We like to see kind of this. Then I'm able to step back, and I'm able to tweak some things if I think that you're the right partner. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Marty, I was wondering, is there a source of benchmarks, financial benchmarks that banks, I'm sure private lenders are thinking their own metrics, but in terms of what banks, what Warsaw looks for in a given deal, whether it's sub 500K or above?
Yeah, really every deal comes down to the cash flow and whether or not it's going to hit a certain debt service coverage ratio, meaning, you're going to look at every investment property and look at what are the gross potential rents of it. How much is it going to bring in? It's going to, these apartment units are going to rent for $1,500 a month, and there's 10 of them. Here's the gross potential rents it's going to bring in annually, right? And then you have to factor out all the fixed costs, the insurance, the taxes, the management, the pest control, the trash, all of it. And then your net operating income is that bottom number, right? Take that number and factor in what the bank payments are, and that's got to be at 1.2 or greater. That is really how the math works. Like, and every bank is a little bit different. It could be 1.25. If it's if it's multifamily compared to like an industrial building, they could have different underwriting for that. So it could be a 1.25 for a certain different asset. But in the end, that's how the math works. We look at what's the NOI divided by the debt service. And, sometimes that debt service is obviously affected by what are the interest rates. So when we've had a high interest rate environment these past few years, it's taken a lot of development deals and just killed them because now the math doesn't work. You can only get so much in rents, right? You can't keep raising rents and expect them to be full all the time. So, here's what the pro forma looks like based on a realistic income stream, right? Let's be conservative with the budget and figure out, all right, what are all the expenses going to be? Sometimes we get some pie in the sky, unrealistic pro formas. Banks are going to underwrite a little more conservatively, but it really just comes down to the math.
I just wanted to add before we take the next question, we are going to wrap after this, so we can give folks time to maybe go ahead on up to this, but I just want to add that.
Just got one quick question. You mentioned two acronyms, NOI and something else. What were those acronyms?
Yeah, the NOI is the net operating income, meaning what's the gross potential rents minus all the expenses, that's going to equal your net operating income. And NOI is kind of a weird acronym. Banks are full of acronyms, man. I know. It's like alphabet soup. Right? But if you take the NOI, the net operating income, and divide it by what your debt service is, how much your loan payments are, that'll come up with your debt service coverage ratio. Yeah.
Which essentially means, are you making enough money to pay the loan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And putting a little bit more in your pocket. Like after you make the loan payments, can you put a little bit more in your pocket? That means it's a positive deal.
What are some common budgeting pitfalls and strategies to avoid now?
Being too optimistic.
I was just gonna say, stop lying to yourself. That is a common mistake a lot of developers do, is they lie to themselves, right? They say, oh, I know I can get $2,500 a month in rent for something they know you probably won't be able to get more than $1,500, right? Or you on your pro forma, you're sending into the bank your pro forma, and you only have a 3% vacancy rate, right? And so, these are things that you have to understand, that when the bank sees this, they're either going to understand two things. They're going to understand your knowledge and what you really know because you sent the pro forma in, right, with some errors on there. But then also they're going to help you understand that this is how you're supposed to underwrite your deals, right? So, some pitfalls are, like you said, being a little too optimistic on the income that you're gonna bring in. Also, devaluing or taking down the number of what your actual operation costs are going to be, right? So, like management, for instance, your average property management company is going to charge you 10%, right? So don't send in a pro forma that has 5%, right? It's probably not going to happen. So just different, things like that you want to make sure that you're not lying to yourself and, flexing the numbers.
I've done some really bad deals, and I've done some decent deals, some good deals. If I look at my really bad deals, there's probably 4 things early that happened. One, we were way overly optimistic about what we could do in terms of the spreadsheets, right? So we just went in our spreadsheet and started adjusting numbers until we got to what we wanted without any kind of due diligence behind it, right? So one is being way overly optimistic. 2 is not doing our due diligence. And early in my career, I even showed up with bad numbers, right? The 4th thing that I'm going to add is you got to have a team. Because you don't know everything, and I think when you're able to have a team with some experts, right, then it shows that you understand that there is a level of complexity around a certain area, and you can lean on your team member to provide you with the right counsel and the right responses to whoever that investor is. So, going it alone is difficult for us. We would rather bring in partners, give up a little bit of equity, as long as it's what we call smart money.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm looking at a package, and whether it's Atlanta, Orlando, whatever market it is, there's a good chance I've already seen 15 or 20 other deals in that market in the last 6 to 12 months. So I have a pretty good idea of kind of like where things should be. And there's a lot of times that somebody will send me a deal, and whether it's the budget, the rents, the exit cap rate assumption, growth, whatever it is. I mean, it's Excel. You can get whatever answer you want. But I'll be like, hey, this doesn't line up with what these other projects I've seen. Why? And then a lot of times, there's not a good explanation. I mean, sometimes there is, hey, I'm going to get rents that are $500 higher than everybody else because I'm going to build a best-in-class product that is just not in the market right now. Okay, cool. But if you can't explain why your project is going to be different than everything else that I've seen, that's going to be a tough sell.
Okay. What tools and softwares are you using for financial budgeting and just to manage the budget that you can share?
I mean, I still use Excel. I mean, I've got this old school multifamily cash flow spreadsheet that I've been carrying around for years that I'm super familiar with, right? And like when I first initially look at a deal, I'm not the underwriter, right? I'm the lender. So I'll look at it and I'll basically plug the numbers in to my own like just knowledge base and calculations from what my spreadsheet's telling me. And if it doesn't come anywhere near it, I typically won't submit it to our underwriters because it's not going to work, right? But you know, I still use Excel, believe it or not. I mean, there's a lot of good software out there, but I'm 51 years old, man. I can't change. I'm an Excel guy.
33 and I use Excel.
So who would,
Yeah, we use Excel.
Yeah, but I didn't make it up. I didn't come up with this template. I stole it like everything else. You know, what's the best form of flattery is
always steal people's models.
That's
exactly.
right. That's right. No, that yeah, right. You know, we joke about that, but that is very true. Over the years, you will meet different developers who have a different way of running their models and their analyzers. And if something works for you, that's the thing, is just get something that you can understand and that you can navigate through, that you will actually use, because that's a challenge. Understanding pro formas and how to work those is an entirely different skill set that you really want to work on consistently. And so, you know, I would recommend, even if you're an aspiring developer, and even if you don't have the plan to actually purchase a project, you need to be running numbers and analyzing one deal a day, and just putting in numbers to understand what's going on.
Happy to share it as well. If anybody wants me to email in this spreadsheet, I'm happy to.
I would also say, you know, if you guys do have your own model, anybody that sends me a deal, my first question is, hey, send me your model also. And if I can't figure out how your model's working, like I said, make it easy for me. If I can't figure it out, then I'm just gonna move on. So you can't be the only one that understands how it's working.
Mitch. Next question is, what is methods for estimating costs and forecasting expenses effectively?
I mean, our method is that scorecard that we were talking about before, right? We have a worksheet that every deal has to go through, and there are stages of it, right? So our go, no-go process starts with one level of due diligence, and we bring it to our team, and we decide if we're going to move it forward. If we decided to move it forward, then there's another set of checklists that has to happen before we're going to go talk to an investor or to a bank. So we look at this worksheet, and that worksheet has all kind of stuff that's in there, from market to understanding. You know, we do land kind of ground up work, and we do land acquisition. So working through that worksheet in the right stages is important to us. That's the only way that we can make sure that we're not spending too much time on a bad deal.
So at this point, we'll open it up to the audience for any questions that you may have for our panelists.
Yeah, this question is from Marty. You talked about like the 22 commercial deals you did in the last couple of years. Like, what's the cycle time on that between when an applicant has contacted you and the cycles you go through? You know, like, obviously you check your spreadsheet and then you send it to underwriting and all that. I mean, like, and what are the levels of approval internally? You know, the hoops that have to be jumped before they get to being funded.
Yeah, it varies a little bit, but I would say cradle to grave. By the time if I get a complete package from a borrower, we can typically, if we like the deal, within a week, if I'm pretty comfortable with the way it underwrites, I can issue a term sheet that'll propose the outline, the way that the bank wants to structure the deal. That could be as short as 2 days to 3 or 4 days. That doesn't mean it's approved. It means, yeah, we're interested. Here's the loan structure that we're willing to possibly provide. Here's what the rate might be. And it's almost like if we can negotiate those terms, and part of that is sitting down with the developer and saying, what's your investment strategy? Is having, a little bit higher of a rate a deal killer for you because we're a community bank? We're not always the cheapest, but we'll structure it in a way that might be better for you. You could be talking to 5 other banks. So I want to find out what your kind of hot button issues are. What do I have to do to win your business? Is a prepayment penalty a deal killer for you? You're planning on flipping this property in a year. You know, is a prepayment penalty going to be something if we waive that, but our rate's a little bit higher? Can we win your business? So a little bit of a negotiation up front, but once we agree to general terms, we submit it to underwriting, and I get an appraisal going. Right now, appraisals on, say, a multifamily deal is taking anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks to even get back. But we're underwriting while that's going on. So in some instances, we've been able to get an approval done before the appraisal comes back. Where it's like, look, it's approved, but the appraisal has to be this number for it to work. If the appraisal comes in lower than we anticipate or you did, then we may have to like right size the loan and bring it down a little bit. But short answer is anywhere from probably 45 days to 60 days from the first time that we sit down and talk to you.
And what kind of, like, I'm sorry to hog the questions, but what kind of, like, default rates have you seen? I mean, obviously, you guys, like you said, you're a community bank and working with.
Oh, default rates. We're negotiation the divorce before we get married, right? We don't like to talk about default rates.
The reason I ask is because obviously that drives your costs, right?
Yeah.
That's why you're saying, like, you're a little bit higher or whatever. Maybe taking, I'm just curious.
What's like, so if a loan goes to default, what's the rate trigger to after that?
No. I'm saying, like, out of the 22, how many will default?
Oh, we don't have any.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we're starting this portfolio sort of from the ground up. So we're keeping it between the fairways. If we have one deal out of the first 10 that we did go into default, then we got a pretty bad situation. Like we're pretty clean. Yeah, we don't have any.
Question in the back.
Yes, Marty, you just mentioned sometimes you have to right size the loan. What does that mean? And how would you?
Yeah, it just means that the borrower would have to bring more equity in. So if the math doesn't work by either the debt service coverage ratio or by the appraisal, then, you know, if we propose a loan at $800,000 on $1 million deal and the appraisal comes in at $950,000, we have to lower our loan amount to keep it at 80%. So right sizing just means bringing the loan amount down so it still hits all the metrics. So, you know, whether it's 75% loan to value or 80 or the debt service coverage ratio, those are the two things that really are going to kind of factor what the end loan amount is going to be.
Okay, and then, another question is, on new construction, then how would the appraiser appraise that? Give you a-
Yeah. Well, he's going to get your construction budget from your contractor, a detailed construction budget, so that we know what the cost is going in. And on the income side, he's going to look at comps in the area and make sure that your pro forma matches what the type of rents it's going to bring in. Right? So we're going to know what the cost is, and we're going to take the rents that we think it's going to bring in. We look at your pro forma that you provide, but the appraiser also looks at comps in the area. Right? So we know how many units it is and how much it's going to bring in per month. And then we factor in whatever the local cap rate is. So the cap rate kind of dictates what the value is going to be. Right? So if it's a apartment building, like that's bringing in, you know, I don't want to name neighborhoods, but a cap rate, the lower the cap rate is, if it's in a really nice area, the more valuable the property is going to be. So some areas have a 10% cap rate for apartment buildings. Other areas have a 6% cap rate, depending on where it is in the country, in the region. And the appraisers have all that information and knowledge based on their knowledge of the industry. But they look at what the income is going to be and what the cap rate is and what the cost is to build. So, I mean, the commercial appraisals, you know, if you get your house appraised, it's a few pages. You know, a limited summary appraisal on a commercial property could be 80, 90 pages. And a lot of it's just mind-bending that you don't want to read it. Just, yeah.
There's just a few different approaches that they consider when they do your appraisal, like an income approach. Like you said, if you're in a larger multi-unit, your value is not just determined by what if you have a 10-unit building here and, you know, there's a 10-unit building next door, just because this one sold for $1 million doesn't mean that yours is worth $1 million. It's really based on the income. If you yield a higher income on this building, you're going to get a higher return. So there's a couple of approaches for smaller residential, like single family. They may do what's called a comparable approach.
Current
But going
sales.
off of what other properties that are similar to yours, what have they sold for, and that's how they determine your value. So it's just different, it's different for different types of real estate, whether it be commercial, residential, they factor in different things, depending on the, like I said, the type.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, my question is for beginners and getting into this industry and having backing to buy property and having to have a structured deal. Is there somewhere you can go, or you guys say partner up with somebody, but you're not just gonna partner up with somebody you don't know, and somebody doesn't wanna partner up with you that don't know you. So, and when I first started in the business, I used to deal with RIA a lot, and they had a lot of different things in there. Now with me getting back into the business, I know certain banks don't want this type of loan or that type of loan. My question for you guys, getting back into it, what would be a good way or a good avenue to go down to get the right paperwork to approach the right type of lenders?
I'll just say, and I'll let you all go. But I think it's not a question of where do you go. It's almost what value do you add. The great way to be able to collaborate with different developers is adding value to the actual development itself, right? So what are you bringing to the table, whether that be the site control, whether that be money, right? Whether that be credit worthiness, right? Do you have the idea, right? And so it's understanding what your current capacity is and how you bring value to a development. And then when you talk to people, they'll point you in the right direction as to who you may want to talk to partner up with that. It's not really like a where can you go, because you're here. This is where you go, to meet developers. I mean, honestly, right? This is where you go to meet the actual people. But now that you're in the room, right, and you may have an idea or you may know your value, it's okay, how do I communicate my value to that actual developer? So that I am coming into this actual deal bringing something to it. I talked about this a little bit yesterday, but it's one of those things where everyone is looking for a mentor, right? But the great way to be able to actually get that mentor to actually talk to you or spend time with you is if you're bringing value to them as well. And so just a couple of ways that you can do that. Like I said, source a deal, maybe have money, maybe have the vision, and being able to solve problems.
Yeah, I've very rarely ran into people in this industry that weren't willing to share their knowledge. Really, people want to see other people successful, in my opinion, especially in an environment like this where it's collaborative and, part of this conference, and I think, and this is just a greater philosophical thing, but a lot of times the mindset is, here's the pie. The pie is only so big, and if a new developer wants to come in, he's taken away from that pie. It's less for me. And that's not true. Like, the pie will exponentially grow with more people that are doing this, right? So kind of getting past that, there's only limited resources. Like, people really want to see other people successful. So if you're going to approach a successful developer and say, hey, can we sit down and have lunch and tell me how you started, because here's where I'm at, I think more often than not you'll find out people will be receptive to it. You just got to find the right people.
Yeah, I mean, along those similar lines, what I found is real estate is 100% a relationship-based industry, and people want to do business with people they like, and so it's really just about sitting down, talking to people, building that network, and if you can do that, then you'll kind of figure out where you can go to get, if you have a certain problem, how you solve it, that sort of thing.
So let me add just two things. What you said is so spot on. Like, we are what we would call kingdom-driven entrepreneurs. So that means that we approach everything assuming that this is not a zero-sum game, assuming that all of these resources are not my resources and I'm just being a good steward of the resources, because there are so many opportunities out there. From the time I leave here to the time I get home, I will see at least 5 opportunities because those are kind of coming to me. That's one thing, so I really love that. The second thing is finding a mentor. When I first started out, I had what I call my virtual mentors, right? I literally had a list of people. I didn't have access to Dan Nair, but he was on my list. And I could read things about how Dan Nair was doing deals. And by the time I met Dan Nair, I was like, hey, you were my mentor. You didn't know this, But, right, I saw how you did this deal and that deal. I think my deal has some similar characteristics. What would you suggest, right? And every single time I've done that, I've always been in a position where they were taken by it, and then they kind of really leaned into, yeah, let me tell you what happened when we did this deal. So you want to look out for this, you want to look out for that, and then you need to go talk to that person every single time.
And I also had ULI, which is the Urban Land Institute. They have the REAL program, which me and Tony are both graduates of that program. So I think they just started the new class up this year. So that'd be another resource for you to learn about the development process, and also to be able to network and build with, up and coming developers. So,
But if I can be of any help, just call me.
I'm about to call them today. So let's give our panel another round of applause. Did an outstanding job. So again, appreciate everyone coming out to the Black Developers Conference. They do have the happy hour that's at 4:30. So please feel free to network. Make sure you get somebody's contact information. Make sure you meet somebody that you haven't met. Again, in development and real estate, this is a relationship business. So make sure you meet somebody. So thank you.
Hey, last plug. Me and Jose are opening accounts in the back, so stop by and see us.